Hey, good to see everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Daryl, thank you for the introduction. Tim Smith of the Floyd County Baptist Association was supposed to do my introduction, and his wife is going through some health issues. Be in prayer for him. But I wanted to mention also, as well as Daryl was going to introduce me, they could lead this subject capably themselves. Have just seen great results in terms of increasing resources. So I appreciate Daryl, that introduction. Appreciate Tim, and glad to have you with me. Now, by the way, there is a listening guide. If you don't have that, never to fear. Even if you're using it or not, you can email me and I'll send you all my notes, including the blanks filled in already. And my email is real simple, Steve at GMBA, as in Gwinnett Metro Baptist Association, gmba.org. And I'll be glad to send you those as we talk about increasing resources for missions and ministry in your association. Daryl mentioned a little bit of my background. I was blessed to serve my prior 20 plus years coming to this role as a state missionary, working with the Georgia Baptist Mission Board in a variety of roles. And I cannot tell you how helpful that was in preparing me for this ministry that I have now. I learned so much because I was working with Association of Missionaries week in and week out, day in and day out. And I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do just by observing them. Also, by hearing what pastors had to say about associations. As a matter of fact, when I started back in 2020, and just to let you know, I started on the heels of the pandemic. My Monday that I came to the office first time was Monday, March 16th. I worked one day a week for 5 weeks. Literally, if you don't remember, that was the weekend in 2020 where the pandemic unleashed and things began shutting down. That's when I began my ministry. But I'd already beginning making some notes, and I kind of reverse engineered this thing based on things pastors had said about their associations. And I wanted to really do the opposite of what they were saying in order to generate resources. And I hope it's worked. I mean, I'm seeing some good results. As a matter of fact, we've had great speakers today. And right when Bill came on at 9 o'clock, I got my January report, and we had a great month. So our resources are increasing, but you got to know some context here. For well over a decade, the resources have been decreasing in our association. We know the charitable giving is down, and the resources in our association were less than half of what they'd been when they peaked out some years ago, and we're continuing to erode. And my predecessor, who was an interim, who spent an extended time and eventually came on to serve several years, he was sounding the alarm to our pastors. Now, this is a large association, so since there are a large number of churches, they were able to stay afloat. But it's not always the size, I said, of the church, it's the trajectory of the church. Same thing with the association. It's not necessarily how many churches you've got, but it's the trajectory that you're on. And so we were facing those challenges as I came in. But last year in 2023, we were 17% in our church gifts ahead of 2022, which was a great year. So since 2020, we've seen that curve start to go back up, and we are increasing in our resources. Just to kind of set the stage, I want you to know this about me when it comes to working with churches. I never complain to churches about giving. Listen, you never complain people into giving more. I never complain about what a church gives, how much. I'm always just thankful, no matter the size of the gift. I'm thankful for $1 because I'm not even owed that. So I always express thanksgiving. And another thing I want you to hear is I never beg. That's just a leadership principle for me that I say leaders never beg. I never beg for anything. I don't beg for money. I don't beg for resources. My role is to inspire. I want pastors to want to give. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with a very skeptical pastor in the very beginning of my relationship here. And he was not giving at all and was skeptical about the association and associations in general. And I looked at him, I said, brother, I want you to want to give. And if you watch what we do in the coming months, you're going to want to give. And I looked up his church, and we've got 145 churches. Last year, they were number 20 out of 145 in gifts. Now he wants to give because of some changes that we've made. So I want you to hear that. So I'm going to highlight some tools for you that will help you to generate more resources. And I think you'll find some of this an affirmation of some things you've already heard today in these earlier presentations. I've also got these. I'm going to give you 7. They're in priority order. So if you're going to invest your energy somewhere, start with number 1 and number 2. And then if you have time, go to 3, 4, and 5. But they make a bigger difference the earlier you hear these. So if I don't get to number 7, it doesn't matter as much. I want you to hear these first few, but I'll at least mention all of them. But I'm going to start with exaggerating an illustration in a church. Imagine there's 2 men in a church, 2 laymen, and they've been there the same amount of time. They're the same age. They have the same general income. One of these laymen just loves his pastor. He and his pastor spend a lot of time together socially. They just get along. They talk hobbies. They talk sports. They spend time inside and outside the church hanging out. The other person knows the pastor by name. The pastor knows him. They are acquaintances. They don't spend any social time. They don't have a personal relationship. It's just the pulpit to the pew. And here's the preaching, but there's no relationship. And it's not that he dislikes his pastor. He just doesn't have a relationship with his pastor, much less if he disliked him. Now, here's the question, and it's not rocket science. Which of these 2 men is more likely to give more Sunday by Sunday to his church? The one that loves and has a strong relationship with his pastor, or the one who does not, much less the one who would dislike his pastor? Not rocket science. It's the one who has this relationship. Man, I want to say something that's true. The same thing is true of your pastors. The stronger your personal relationship with the pastor, the more likely he is to lead his church to give resources to your association. I have found that to be true. You may remember as Paul was speaking with the Corinthians about generating resources in 2 Corinthians 9:6, he stated, "This I say, he who sows sparingly also reaps sparingly, and he who sows bountifully also reaps bountifully." And I found that this number one thing is you've got to really sow bountifully to get the results. So here are those 7 tools to sow bountifully. And tool number 1 is this from that illustration. It's your relationship with your pastors. Now, on all of these, I'm going to give you a pastor quote. That's a true quote I've heard a pastor say. And I'm going to give you an action step. Here's the pastor quote. I haven't spoken to our association of missionaries in over 5 years. I had a pastor say that, and I'm thinking, how is that possible? That you can go 4 or 5 years. How would it be possible for a pastor to go 4 or 5 years and not speak to a member? Maybe that's why that member does not attend. Maybe that's why that member doesn't go to Bible study. Maybe that's why that member does not give. The same thing is true for us. If there's pastors that we have not spoken to on any level in weeks and weeks and weeks or months and months and months, then that's probably why you're not seeing resources come from them. I have 145 pastors. That's a lot to keep up with. But I have a system where I keep myself accountable for tracking the contacts that I have with our pastors. And I want to say this, I heard our previous speaker say this. In our association, half of our pastors preach in a language other than English on Sunday mornings. As a matter of fact, some of them have very little conversational English. That doesn't stop me. I'm going to interact. I'm going to translators. I'm going to text. I'm going to interact. And one thing that they have said, that they said, my Korean brother said, we can tell you love Korean pastors. Well, I do, but I love all pastors. It doesn't matter whether you speak good English or as a language or not. I'm going to interact with you. I'm going to do all I can to build a relationship. Now, it's true. I don't have the same relationship with all 145 pastors, but they all know that I love them. Now, here's another quote I heard from somebody recently. Our AM is an introvert, and some of you are. And I want to give you some something to help. I'm an introvert, but I've learned as a leader, you cannot lead out of introversion. As a leader, you have to be engaging. So you have to develop people skills, and I've had to develop that because that's not where I'm wired. I've had to rewire myself and really spend time engaging with pastors. Now, I want to wrap this point up by saying this. I'm not asking if your pastors love you, okay? I'm not asking that. I'm asking this, do you love your pastors? Because they know if you don't do or not, and the way they know is by the time that you spend with them, the interaction that you have. So here's the action. Focus on relationships with pastors and build systems to keep yourself accountable. And you will see the better relationship you have with the pastor, the more likely it is to forward resources to your association. Tool number 2 is this. By the way, I could speak for 20 minutes on all of these. I got to hustle. Okay, tool number 2. Your communication of the value of belonging to your association. I want to say it again. Your communication of the value of belonging to your association. Here's the quote. I've heard this dozens of times from pastors through the years. I don't get anything from belonging to the association. And I don't get anything. So what's the point of belonging to the association? Now, when I started, I immediately, before I even met a pastor, I listed if a pastor belongs to this association, these 9 things are going to happen. Now, I made up the word 9. It might have been 11 or 12, but I just made a list. You're going to benefit from these things if I'm the associational missionary. And early on, I communicated what those things were. And one thing that I began doing was identifying for my churches and pastors unique benefits, whether it's discounts at a garage or a restaurant gift certificate, or at Christmas, we give away tons of gifts to pastors. We gave away, for one example, the $1,000 check. And by the way, it did not come from the associational budget. I had it contributed from a larger church, a $1,000 check to help him with Christmas. But every pastor had a shot at that. We had a fun Christmas gathering where we gave away lots of gifts to our pastors. Whether it's tickets to a sporting event, I try to do things where I give them unique benefits. In addition, identifying benefits. Now, you may know that when someone gives to the annuity board through Guidestone, it comes with a large life insurance policy. You probably know that. Most of your pastors don't. Well, when I tell them that I get the benefit of communicating that, I'm continually identifying those things, saying, because you belong to the association, here's the benefit, here's the value to you. So are you doing that? Letting them know what the benefits are. And so here's the action. Make a list of the benefits of belonging to your association. Make a list, put them on your website, mail them to your churches, but continually communicate those benefits and let them know. And Daryl's a great association missionary. We got several of my Georgia friends here. But my pastors, I tell them, listen, there's no better association than the Gwinnett Metro Baptist Network. Now, you should all be saying that. And I tell them, there's things you get here you won't get anywhere else. That's not necessarily true. You can say the same thing, but I want them to believe that there's value in belonging to the Gwinnett Metro Baptist Network. All right, here's tool number 3. Your communication of the vision or cause of your association. Now, remember, again, these are in descending order. The first one's the most important. I think the second one, in my experience, is the second most important. But here's the pastor quote that I reverse engineered this and I focus on. I have no idea what the association does, the pastor said. I have no idea what they do. I know a few of the older pastors get together every few weeks and have lunch. That's all he knew about the association. How is that possible? He doesn't know what the association is all about. If he doesn't know, it's because his association missionary has not communicated to him, either personally and through promos or whatever you do. So it's important that you do communicate what is your vision, what is your cause, what is the point of being a part of this fellowship together. Hey, one thing I did, you probably, like we do, we support some other ministries through our association, and when you give, we forward some resources. It may be a pregnancy center, a maternity home, those type things. We would mail the checks, and about 2 years ago, I stopped mailing the checks and started delivering the checks and taking my iPhone out and doing a 45-second to 90-second video interview as I handed them the check and let them say a word of thank you, and then posting those videos or sending them to our pastors so they could see, again, the value and what God was doing through the resources that they were sending. Another thing I've done, I found helps, is by sending our pastors an update of their giving. I do it 3 times a year. I would do it a minimum of once a year if I had to do it myself and had no help and resources to do that. Here's why. Some of your pastors, they are not giving and they don't even know it. Did you know that? How do I know that? Because your pastors don't write the checks. So I send every year a very nice, polite letter. Hey, thank you for what you do. Here's our vision and so forth. Here's what we're doing. Here's the cause. Here's what God is doing. And I always keep it less than a page. And by the way, the next page shows you what you gave last year. And it shows them what they gave last year and previous year. I've had a pastor said, they apologized. I didn't know we weren't giving. Some pastors think because they're giving to the cooperative program, which they should, they think that you're getting that. And in my situation, we did not receive any cooperative missions funds. So by doing this communication, I'm doing a couple of things. I'm kind of giving a subtle hint. It's very light-handed, but also I communicate the vision. Now, I've narrowed our vision down very simple. Every church thriving and missionally engaged. That's it. Every church thriving and missionally engaged. That is my vision. That is our cause. That's what we're trying to help churches do. So here's the action. Get your vision calls down to a sentence and communicate it, but most importantly, implement it. It can't not be theoretical. Our pastors see us trying to help every church to thrive and to be missionally engaged. Number 4 is this. It's your onboarding skills with new pastors and new churches. How do you treat the pastor? And I've got 3 just now starting, and I've got 3 already engaged with our association through the onboarding. Here's the pastor quote. My associational missionary question mark. I'm not sure who it is or what he does. Can you believe that? Some pastors don't even know who he is or what he does. I want to tell you what, we've got a pastor coming to one of our First Baptist churches in March. I've already had 3 phone calls with him. I've already told him, hey, man, I got a gift basket for you. I want to get for you and your wife. Be looking for that. Hey, I'm going to get you for lunch. I said, hey, I'm coming to hear you preach, but it will not be your first Sunday. I don't go the first Sunday they preach because there's a lot of other things going on. I go the second, third, fourth Sunday. I said, I'm coming in March. It's already on my calendar to hear you. But the onboarding is so important so that out of the gate, I've got 3 pastors now. The former pastors were very lightly, if engaged at all. All 3 of these new pastors already come into everything we're doing. And I know we're going to see the benefit of that. Now, I want to say this, as we're sowing these seeds, you don't see the results next month. You see these over time, and that's why we're seeing our giving grow. We had a pastor come by this week with a $1,200 check. They didn't give anything last year because of the things I'm talking about. And I called him yesterday, and he was just bragging on the relationship and showing appreciation. He's a Russian pastor, and he sees what we're doing. He sees our vision. He sees our cause. But also with our newer pastors, the onboarding with them, whether it's a church planner or a new pastor coming to a new church. So the action is this: make new pastors and new churches feel welcomed and embraced and special, and create an onboarding system, communicate expectations, and get to them early. All right, number 5, I got this one quick. Expansion of the number of churches in your association. It's true that 30 churches can give more than 7 churches. 50 churches can give more than 30 churches, et cetera, et cetera. I'm trying to expand the number of churches, and we are, the number of churches in our association. Here's the pastor quote. We need to worry about the churches we have, and once we get all of them going, we can worry about planning or adding others. Now, here's the flaw. You won't get all the others going. Some of you know me for my Sunday school work. I talk about a pastor says, we're not going to start any new classes till we fill all the classes that we have now. Here's the flaw in that. You'll never fill all the classes you have now. You've got to start new classes because you got 2 or 3. They're just not going to do anything. So start new classes. I'm continually, there's a board right up here. I've got 10 churches. None are from other associations. They're either not Southern Baptist or they're Independent Baptist, but they're theologically aligned, and I'm working to bring them into our network. Some of them will, some of them won't, but I'm growing our network. We brought on 4 new churches last month, and every 2 or 3 months, we're bringing on new churches purposefully. So think about, are you identifying prospective churches? Are you growing the number of churches in your network? Not taking churches from other associations, but bringing in theologically aligned churches. Here's the action step. Develop a new church prospect list and nurture it month by month. This includes plants, new SBC congregations, and listen to me, don't be defeatist and think new churches can't be added. Yes, they can. It takes work, and you got to keep nurturing and harvesting. Someone mentioned earlier about bringing other churches from other denominations to events. We do bring them because once they come, many times they see the value of SBC life and associations. And we have won some churches into our denomination who are theologically aligned by doing that. Our last 2 tools quickly. Number 6, discovery of grants, sources outside of church gifts. Here's the pastor quote. Our folks don't have much money. And you may be thinking our association doesn't have much money. Well, there's money out there in your churches and beyond that. So here's the action. I don't have time to dig into this one. Continually research and ask about potential grants and gifts. 2 years ago, I got a 6-figure gift from a man of a lot of means. I shared our vision. As a matter of fact, he funded an additional full-time staff member for us who's focused on church planning, and it's not even coming from our budget, and it's paying tremendous dividends. So be looking for those other sources out there, which leads me to number 7, which is similar. Tool number 7 is be entrepreneurial. Here's the pastor quote. how do we give to the association? Had somebody asked that recently. I had to explain to them, here's how you give. Well, being entrepreneurial, though, is I found there are some ministries of businesses who will contribute a percentage to your association if you highlight their ministry or business. And we've seen some additional resources flow from that. You can also, I know some associations rent baptistries, they rent evangelism trailers. So look for those opportunities, not from the church, but from the business world or the nonprofit world who may send things your way. So you've got to be entrepreneurial, and it can actually help boost your budget. So here is the action. Meet with some creative leaders in your association, younger leaders, younger pastors, older pastors who are creative, and brainstorm ways to raise money apart from church gifts. Don't just rely on what your churches give. That should be the core, certainly, but go beyond that, but use your judgment in what to apply and how to apply it. Well, like the previous speaker, I want to keep us on schedule, and so I want to give us time for maybe 2 or 3 questions and keep us on time at 11:40 for our next speaker. So, Daryl, you got any questions you see in the chat box there we want to hit real quick, brother?
No questions that I see right now. Let me ask any questions you want to say from the floor.
Hey, Steve, you mentioned tracking contacts with pastors. Is there a particular tool? Do you use a spreadsheet? How do you track and hold yourself accountable in those
Yeah, I'm a little old school about that, but there's better resources. I do it on a spreadsheet, and honestly, I've got every pastor's name. And I can tell you the last time I talked to every pastor in an association. If you ask me right now, when's the last time you talked to Chris Alexander? If I don't know, I can look it up and say, I talked to him last Thursday. Or I can say I talked to him 2.5 months ago. I can tell you the last time I talked to him, and I can tell you the last time I saw him face to face. Every day I list the pastors I saw yesterday or talked to yesterday. Of course, on Monday, I do it for the weekend, and I keep a track of that. Also, it lets me know last time I talked to a pastor, I can go to the bottom of the list. If there's somebody I haven't talked to in a while, if there's a church I haven't been to in a while, or also it lets me see which pastors are very engaged when it comes to officers or helps. And so there's a lot of value. So there's other probably better technical resources. I think the issue there, when we talk about time management, I've always told my staff, I don't care what system you use, but you must have a system. Same thing's true for I don't care which system you use, but you need to have a system, because what's happening, if you're not tracking it, there's a pastor you haven't talked to in months and you don't even know it. Okay. So it's like, again, going back to my Sunday school stuff, you track the attendance of your members so you know when's the last time they were in Sunday school or Bible study. Why do you do that? So if there's somebody been missing several weeks, you know it, and you can go back and reach out to them. So I keep up with it, so I'm not missing anybody, so nobody's falling through the cracks. But great question. I'm sorry I don't give you a specific. My answer, though, is a spreadsheet, but there's other resources out there.
Hey, Steve, there is a question in the chat that asked, any suggestions on building relationships with bivocational pastors? It's hard. Any specific tips?
Hey, listen, what I do. I'm not telling you to do it, but I'm telling you, here's what I do. Whenever we do a gathering, 90% of the time, we do it twice in the same day, noon and 6:30. As a matter of fact, last Thursday, we had a noon meeting and it's the same meeting. When we say you come to either one, that means there's fewer at each one, but there's more total. And that gives people options. So that's one thing we do, and they see the value of that. That's really helped them. And the other thing is, you've got to be willing to have dinners instead of lunches. You've got to be willing to meet on Fridays and Saturdays sometimes. But the bottom line is you've got to spend time. But another thing too, I have pastors to my home sometimes in the summer. We have some things at the office, but there's no unique way. But you've got to find a way to connect with them, and don't let them being bivocational, just like language. You can't use that as a barrier or excuse. You've got to be proactive in recognizing that and spending time. That means maybe some days instead of working from, and I'm making this up, from 9 to 5, you may need to work from 3 to 11 sometimes, and shift your schedule so you're having the interaction with your bivocational leaders. But it is important, because in your association, like in mine, probably half or more are bivocational. Great question.